you are selling them a security because they're giving you money and you're promising them a return. That's the definition of a security. Take money from passive investors where the returns are generated by your efforts. Like you're doing all the work, they're giving you money. That's your textbook definition of a security.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. Nothing you hear on this show is legal or investment advice, nor is it an offer to buy or sell securities. Always consult your own legal and financial professionals before making decisions. Welcome back to another Capital Flow podcast. I'm your host, Dallon Schultz. Super excited to have my friend Mauricio and our attorney. He helped us set up our real estate fund. So we're going to talk about today some of the landmines that capital raisers step on. And for those of you that aren't as familiar with Mauricio, he is the founder of Platinum Legal and the premier syndication attorney in the country that helps real estate syndicators stay out of jail and is one of the few lawyers that actually speaks English. We were talking about this right before recording. I was at a conference. Somebody was talking about asset protection, and I was like, Mauricio, you should have been there instead of that person. Great information, but Mauricio does regular traveling around the country, speaking to real estate syndicators about how the legal piece fits into the overall syndication puzzle. And it's this information is absolutely critical. And he's represented some of the biggest syndicators in the real estate space, including Brandon Turner, former host of The Bigger Pockets, Ken McElroy, who's a Rich Dad advisor, Pace Morby, Ryan Pineda, Robert Helms, Justin Waller, Kathy Fettke, and many, many more. So, Mauricio, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be here, man. Love the studio. Love what you're doing here, man.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Mauricio, before we get started, share with our listeners a little bit about how you got into the syndication space as an attorney.
Dude, totally by accident. So, I'm originally from Santiago, Chile. Came here when I was, about 15 or 16. Didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up. Ended up going to UC Berkeley, for my college degree. I still didn't know what to do. And honestly, I kind of fell into law, just in law in general, just because I didn't know what else to do. I literally was like, well, like some buddies of mine, they were like political science majors, they were history majors, and they just ended up going to law school. And to me, it was like that was kind of the only thing that I wasn't thrilled about it, but that was kind of the path that I needed to follow. So went to law school, and went to law school, and then I got lucky that I got to work got hired by a really great litigation firm, a law firm in Southern California. And I just stumbled upon securities laws because that's what they did. They did a lot of securities laws and they did a lot of maritime because they were in Long Beach. They had the port. But I specialized in litigation. So I was like representing sort of the brokerage houses, the Merrill Lynch's, the JP Morgan's, the Goldman Sachs, American Expresses. And, clients would sue them, right? So people would sue them and then we would defend them. So we would spend a lot of time in depositions and motions and arbitrations and trial work and appellate work, like that litigation thing. And that's kind of how I started my career in the securities world. But it wasn't until later on that when I left the firm, and I'll tell you a really good story about why I left the firm, but it's not until I left the firm and actually kind of stumbled across the syndication. But one of the things that was going on while I was at the firm is I was in the middle of the rat race. Like, as a lawyer, it's just a brutal schedule. It's a grind. You're getting up in the morning. You're basically just going to work.
Especially with litigation, I'd imagine.
It is litigation. It's billing every 6 minutes of your time, which is that's the reason I left. So I was going to work. I was working all day. I was working all night, working on the weekends, barely had any time for my own social life or gym or anything like that. And what really stuck with me was when I had to go in on the weekends because, again, you've got to bill a certain amount of hours every month. It's almost impossible to get it done in a regular, our regular hours were really more like 8:30 to 6:30. So even in that 10-hour window, there's just no way you're going to bill, 8-9 hours in that 10 hours. And so people going on the weekends. And when you go into a building in a weekend, as there's usually security down there because it's the weekend. And so you got to sign in, right, to go up to the thing. And I would see partners that had been at the firm for 20 plus years who I knew were family guys who were, had 5 kids or whatever. And they were in there on a Sunday at 6:30 in the morning.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, that's not what I want to be doing 20 years from now. Even though I didn't even, I didn't have kids, I didn't have a family. Like I know at some point I want to have a family. I want to be a family guy. I do not want to be coming in on a Sunday at 6:30 to get my stuff done so that I can go home. So that really, resonate with me. And I would have these, Don, I would have these out of body experiences where literally late at night, I remember one specific one, it's like 11 o'clock at night, like everybody's gone. So imagine the building, it was like 15 story thing, but I'm on the 9th floor. The whole building is dark except one light in one office, which was my office, right? And I would have these out of body experiences where it's almost like a helicopter or a drone, it's flying just outside the window. And I was looking back into the window where I could see my office and I could see somebody at the desk working, till 11 o'clock at night, midnight. And I'm like, this is not what I want to do. This is not sustainable. This is not the life I want to have. I don't want to do this until I'm 65 years old and retire. And I just knew that something was out of whack. And I got super lucky in that I was actually in Miami, which I just got back from again. And I was trying to find a book to read on the way back from my Miami trip. And I'm just looking for something to read. And I came across, the little purple book that so many of us are familiar with, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I almost didn't buy it because I'm like, I just didn't, back then I didn't like books with titles with the word rich in it. That just turned me off. And I'm like, it's rich. I'm like, let me go see if I can find something else. And I couldn't find anything else. And this was a New York Times bestseller. I'm like, screw it. Let me just read it. And I devoured it on the plane, of course. And it basically changed the course of my career and my life. Not only from a mindset standpoint, because it's primarily people get upset about the book, but it's not really a tactical book. It's more of a mindset and context book.
Yeah.
But it reaffirmed all of these things that I'd been sort of feeling. I'm like, there's got to be more than this. This thing that I now know is called a rat race. That just didn't seem right when I was working at the firm. So it just made it very concrete that this is exactly what's going on, that there's more out there, that I need to do something else. But what was awesome for me was that, obviously that's how I got introduced to Robert Kiyosaki. And I kid you not, Dallon, like 2 weeks later, I was living in LA at the time, driving down the street, and I hear a radio drop in from Robert Kiyosaki. And back then, obviously, radio was the thing. That dates me how long ago this was. But it was Robert Kiyosaki, and he was doing a promo ad or a drop-in for the real estate guys. He's like, hey, this is Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If you're serious about investing in real estate, check out the real estate guys. They really know what they're talking about. And I was like, I was into real estate. And had I not read the book, that radio ad would have meant nothing. I would have just been another ad, and I would have done. But because I'd read the book and I heard the drop-in, I went to see the real estate guys, which I know you know them well as well, and they did some crazy event. It was an amazing all-day event on real estate, super value add, and just nothing but value. I'm taking notes like there's no tomorrow, and that kind of got me into their world. Where fast forward, probably a year after that, I became their general counsel. So I actually left the firm, because I knew there was something else, and I went to work in-house, sort of as their general counsel, more of the something that I didn't have to bill every 6 hours of my life or whatever. So that's really where I cut my teeth, going full circle on syndication, because back then, and this is almost 20 years ago now, they were raising a lot of capital. They were doing it old school. And you can imagine, this is before social media. This is before, so they would literally wear suit and ties. We would throw events in person, 100 people, 80 people, whatever, do the presentation. I would be there with all of the legal documents printed out on a piece of paper, people signing the documents there, writing me a check. Like, it literally, that's how it was done back then. But that's really where I cut my teeth, because they were working with a securities attorney when I joined them. So I was sort of interacting with this attorney as their general counsel. And so that's kind of like where I learned and cut my teeth on it. So that, 3 or 4 years after that, when I left the real estate guys, kept them as a VIP client, but started my own firm, I could help clients on my own and help them navigate this complex world of securities.
And all that started because of a book.
It all started because of a book. Now, I love thinking about going back, and I always think about, had I not picked up the book at the airport, would I eventually found it anyway a couple years later? Maybe eventually I would have read the book, but for sure I would have heard the radio. I assume I would have heard the radio drop in, but it wouldn't have meant anything. So I wouldn't have met the real estate guys who really changed the next level of changing the direction of my life, because through Robert, I've met all the Rich Dad advisors, become really good friends with most of the Rich Dad advisors, one of them being Tom Wheelwright, who's the Rich Dad CPA and author of Tax-Free Wealth. Through him, I met another contact that he got me connected with, which is how I met my wife.
Oh, wow.
Right? So there's this thread going through Robert, and I've been fortunate enough now to have met Robert. I know Robert a little bit, certainly not best friends or anything, but where I've told him the story, because that thread started with Robert. Then it led to the real estate guys, who then met with another guy, this guy Mike Dillard, over at the well-known guy. He there was like a wedding in the Cook Islands that I got invited to that I shouldn't have been invited to, and somehow almost didn't go. Ended up going and found my wife, Met my wife there, and we just celebrated 11 years, a couple months ago. So
Congratulations.
thank you. There's just that little thing, yeah.
So it's I know you know this because we've had a few conversations. I didn't realize how similar our journeys were until right before we started recording. I knew you worked with that maritime law group and you transitioned into real estate. For me, I was in the medical field. And when you talked about that out-of-body experience looking in at that office, I felt my blood pressure starting to rise because I had a similar experience when I was in the medical field. My desire was always to specialize. I wanted to specialize, become a nurse anesthetist, make a few $100,000 a year, and then invest in real estate. So in my mind, this was going to be in my 40s or 50s, right? That's the limitation I set on myself. And then I broke my leg playing soccer. And that's when I realized something had to change. Because if something like this was to happen again, at that time of that injury, I was married with 2 kids. I've got 4 now. But it made me realize if something like this was to happen again, how would I take care of my family? And for me, I had a similar experience where mentally I was sitting at work when this happened in the ER. My mind flashed forwarded about 10 years. And I said, okay, you're at a point in your life, you have 2 different paths you can choose. At this point, we had bought our first fourplex 2 weeks after reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and without any of our own money. So I had already jump-started the real estate career. And then a few months after that, I said, okay, you can keep pursuing the real estate or you could keep specializing in the medical field. And when I mentally went down that specialization route in the medical field, knowing that it was going to be another 4 or 5 years of school, another couple $100,000 of debt, I felt the walls closing in on me. I literally felt claustrophobic, even though I was sitting in an open room. And that's when I realized I got to go all in real estate. And it still took about 18 months to transition out of the medical field into real estate, but it was that book. And I heard of that book because of the Real Estate Guys radio. That's so, and we just had Russell Gray in here about a week ago. And so it's incredible that when you set your intentions and you take action, how things can kind of come full circle. And it was through them that I think we connected as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and what's interesting about your story, the beginning of your story, for me happened later then as well for a different reason. So the Real Estate Guys and Robert kind of led me to the syndication world, led me to my wife and the amazing life I have now. But I had a similar scare that you did. It just happened later. So later on, even though I had my own firm, right? This is a good business and scaling story. I had my own firm, but I really didn't own a company. I just owned a job. Like I was a single solopreneur. I was doing all the legal work. I had some paralegals and I even had some contract attorneys. But at the end of the day, I was just working from, just burning the midnight oil. And it was just me. Like I didn't have a team. I was a single point failure. And I got sick myself. I didn't break anything. I actually had a botched surgery. But I was literally out of commission for about, let's call it 8 months completely. Wow. Like revenues going down to zero. Because I'm a single point failure, I'm literally in the hospital with IVs hooked up to me, sitting on the little chair next to the bed on my laptop, trying to, get stuff. Because everybody was super, super understanding and appreciate all that stuff. But hey, I got to close a multi-million-dollar transaction. It's interesting that you're in the hospital, and I'm really sorry this happened, but I got to close next week, right? So, and here I'm trying to outsource some of the stuff and send it to other people. Things aren't going well. So I'm like literally working. And revenues go down to zero. And so when I got out of that experience, I said the same thing. I'm like, dude, if this happens again, I can't let this happen. I mean, fortunately at the time we had some reserves and it didn't really affect our sort of personal stuff, but the business went to zero. And so I looked in the mirror and said, look, if this ever happens again, if I get hit by a bus, we can't go through this again. So I need to create something bigger than just me. I can't be the single point failure. I need to create a business, a self-sustaining business that will run without me. Get to a point where if I get hit by a bus and I'm out for a year, clients will still get served, people will still run the business, and yes, hopefully I'm still going to be missed, but it's not completely reliant on me. And so that's what I started looking to and building. This happened in 2018. So 2018, 2019 is when I started building. I had a very specific goal of I need to get this to a point where I can disappear for a year and the business won't collapse, and that's what I've been working towards building. Which I'm happy to say I did do that. And that's one of the reasons I was able to exit that company last year, because I got it to a point where didn't even need me really. So honestly, I think everybody around was like, why are you still here, Mauricio? We don't need you. Go away. So I'm like, oh, I might as well sell it to you guys.
That's incredible. Real quick, two of my favorite books on this topic, and then we'll move on to more tactical stuff. Who Not How.
Yep.
And Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Those are two of mine and Paul's favorite books that have really helped us set the foundation of what we're looking for and what we're trying to accomplish. I got 4 little kids at home. Paul's got 5 little kids, and they're between the ages of 1 and 10. So we're in the thick of it.
If you're looking for a great leadership book and a time management book, Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell is a no-brainer. I'm part of his coaching program now because I wanted more. Once I read that, there's only like 3 or 4 books in my life that have been transformational. Rich Dad Poor Dad being one of them. His is one of them. It just completely changed everything. The way I work.
It's stuff that you can apply today.
Yep,
it's stuff that you can apply today. So incredible.
Yeah, and Dan's a great guy.
So let's take a small pivot here and transition more so into capital raising. This being the Capital Flow podcast, we want to give strategic thoughts, ideas around how people can effectively raise capital. And with you being here, compliance is absolutely critical. And before we get into that, I want to get your thoughts on this. With the real estate market shifting recently, a lot of people are getting caught with their pants down and from decisions they made a few years ago. I personally also believe it's one of the best times to start raising capital because things are on sale. And so if you're listening to this and you're considering getting into the capital raising game, I think now is one of the best times more than ever. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I mean, the time that most people build businesses or become successful are during the times where it looks like things aren't going well. It's the bottom. There's not a huge demand for things. When everybody else is fearful, that's when you want to get in and do your stuff. The best example I give you is, you mentioned Ken McElroy. You know Kenny. Ken started like in 2007, 2008. He's made most of his money in that 2008 recession because he was buying stuff when nobody else wanted it. He was buying stuff below replacement cost. He was buying stuff when nobody else wanted it. The real estate was done. It's never coming back. It's the worst investment ever. When that environment works, you're in that environment, that's when you want to pounce. Warren Buffett says the same thing, right? When everybody is fearful, you want to be greedy. And when everybody's greedy, you want to be careful. And so you want to kind of buck the trend a little bit. And you're definitely seeing now scenarios where there's a lot of distress in the market. There's a lot of properties that are going that are even below replacement cost again, which we hadn't seen in a long, long time. So if you're able to stomach it, which is a tough thing to do, right? And you're able to, stay in there for a while, because real estate is a long-term play. It's not something that you try and time the market. It's not something you get in today. Hopefully you're going to flip it next month or next week or next year. If you have a longer-term 5, 10, 15, 20-year horizon, then this is just one of those points in the curve where I don't know if we're at the bottom. We're definitely around the bottom. I mean, in multifamily, which is where most of my clients are, we've seen in some markets 30, 35% drop. Now, most of that happened at the beginning, honestly. It's kind of stabilized since that initial 25, 30% drop. Could it drop another percentage? Sure. Is it going to drop another 30%? I doubt it. But it's definitely somewhere in the bottom, and whether the bottom is this year or the bottom is next year, the bottom is starting to form. And so if you have a longer term horizon, you can buy something and knowing at least 5, 10-year horizon. I think this is a great time to get in.
And you have a program. You mentioned that you exited your law firm, sold it to your partners, and all along you've always been really good about educating. I think this is one of the things that drew us to you and chose to use you for our fund is your passion for educating and being able to speak in a way that's like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So if somebody is newer to the space or they're considering, is this something that they should pursue? Is this a type of resource that you offer that you can help them? At what point should somebody start going after raising capital, and how do they go about it the best way?
Yeah, I mean, the whole reason I started my program, and I wanted to start this while I was at the firm, because while I'm at the firm, so just so everybody knows, I'm a securities attorney, right? And I founded Premier Law Group, and we would help clients, but clients wouldn't call us until they were literally ready to start raising money, meaning they were usually real estate, they were in contract. So they identified a property, they got into contract, and it's like, oh crap, I got to go raise a bunch of money. I need a bunch of docs, or I think I need some stuff. Let me go hire a securities attorney. And that's what we would do. We would hire the clients, and then literally we would get literally all the legal documents done in probably within 2 to 4 weeks from time, getting stuff. But all of that time before then, from the time they decided to start raising capital, which may have been, years ago, or they may have attended a seminar a few years ago, or there may be a coaching program, all the way up until that spot, that time frame is what I call, there's a gap. There's a compliance gap because they don't have an attorney yet. They're all excited about raising capital. They maybe joined a program. They've gone to seminars. They're reading up on it, kind of like when you were broken your leg and you're like doing all the research. Up until the time they hire an attorney, which is at the end of the process. Once you hire the attorney, especially if they're a good one, you're kind of covered. They should be advising you. They'll tell you what you can and cannot do. But up until then, that gap, I'm calling it like the syndicator blind spot, because people are out there and they're stepping on these landmines. This is what I call it. They're out there talking to investors, posting on social media, sometimes even getting soft commitments, and they're just blatantly violating compliance rules, not because they want to. They just don't know. They don't know what they don't know, right? They just don't know. And so I really wanted to address that gap, and I said, hey, how can we create something that people can, when they're not quite ready for an attorney, they have a resource that they can come back week in and week out and ask specific questions. So that's what I did. I've created a program where once a week we all get together. I do a little bit of a, like a presentation, a keynote, so people can learn. But really, it allows them to start asking questions so that we can implement those rules. Because you hear all these rules. You can do this, you can't do this, the 8 steps, the 5 things, the 3, all these things. But what about your specific situation? Like, here's a post I want to make on social media. Is this okay? Right. And so this is a forum where people can come to me and say, hey, I want to post this, or I have this question, or I'm doing a promissory note. Is that a security? Like all of these questions on a weekly basis, because it's difficult to go hire an attorney just to go ask them one question. Right. That just doesn't exist. When lawyers onboard a new client, there's all the admin, there's an engagement letter, there's conflicts check, there's a whole thing. They're not going to do that for a 30-minute consultation, right? They want a $5,000 retainer or whatever. And so this is just an easy way for people to have access to a securities attorney, one that's been doing it for 20 years, and we can actually implement what they're thinking of doing. So the next time they go to a meetup, for example, they know what they can and cannot say at that meetup because they've got somebody to sort of bounce those ideas off.
And just to reemphasize, they are going to an attorney. You are an
That's
attorney.
Right. I am an attorney. That's absolutely right. I am an attorney, but I'm now consulting with them, and I'm helping them implement the rules, as opposed to when they're ready, drafting the legal documents and making sure that they're, at that point doing it right. All the landmines that happen before then, I want to make sure they don't step on them, because when they step on these landmines, by the time they get to the point that they want to hire an attorney, it's too late. Yeah. They've already sent out the stuff. They've already sent out the email. They've already sent out the post on social media. They've already blown their exemptions. They've already stepped on those landmines, and they've just exploded on them.
We're going to get into these landmines, but if somebody is interested in learning more about this program, what's the best way?
They can just go to coachingwithmauricio.com. It's probably the best one. Just www.coachingwithmauricio.com and just fill that out, and I'll reach out and see if it's a fit.
And this is a program that we ourselves are a part of, and you've got some serious players in that space. So not only do people get that legal counsel from you, but they also get the experience of people actively doing this in the space as well.
Yeah, the feedback I've gotten a lot is like, so some people have yet to ask a question, but they just learn so much from other people asking questions that's kind of one of the hidden values. I thought the value was going to be, hey, you get to ask me a question, but so many people have said, hey, look, I don't ask a question, but you get 15 or 20 questions every week.
Hey, as a business owner or entrepreneur, one of your biggest struggles is raising capital. Maybe you've gone to the bank, maybe you've been turned down, or maybe you just have never thought of before speaking to investors. The reason the people here at Coppolis Pro, Dallon and Paul, have decided to partner with us over here at Capital Connections is we not only teach people how to attract and raise capital, we actually put you in the rooms where the capital flows. That's right. My name is Brad Blazer, and I've raised over $2 billion. And over the last 5 years, I have personally taught and mentored hundreds of people around the world on how to attract, raise, and close capital so they can be doing something bigger in life. But it's not only the coaching and mentoring. While we're working together, I put you in rooms of curated events with family offices, broker-dealers, and registered investment advisory firms. That's right. We create the proximity to my network because we know that proximity is power. It's our belief and our finding that no other company out there offering services in the capital raising space is doing that. which is why we have forged this strategic relationship. If you'd like to learn more, click the link below that's provided here in this podcast. And this is Brad Blazer saying, we can't wait to work together.
I'm like, wow, I didn't even think of that, or whatever. And then we do some website reviews and social media reviews and email reviews and stuff like that. So it's been fun. And look, I love doing it. Like I think the reason I'm pretty good at the educational part is because I truly enjoy it. I really love. I do think that's my superpower, is taking these complicated, complex, esoteric securities things and just translating them into plain English and making them easy to understand. And I really get a lot out of seeing it on in the person's face, where it clicks for the first time. They've heard it a million times from other attorneys, but the way the other attorneys deliver the message, as Dan Martell likes to say, it's what's caught, not taught, right? And so if you can't receive the information, it doesn't matter how good the information is. So I think I just have that knack of communicating in such a way that people understand what they're doing and why what they're doing is either not correct, and here are the ways you could do it properly.
100%. So we're not going to get into all these landmines because we just want to tease our listener a little bit. But let's talk about a few of the most common landmines that people step on.
I mean, the biggest landmine by far, especially for new syndicators or people who haven't been doing this for a while, is not being able to answer this very specific question, right? And it's a yes or no question. But if you answer this question wrong, it's literally explode. And that is me taking this money from the investors or from this person, is that a security? Because if your answer is no, because it's a promissory note, so it's not a security. Oh, it's a joint venture. Oh, it's just my dad or my family member, so clearly it's not a security. If you answer that question no, well, now you have a non-compliant offering, right? You're supposed to, if you're selling securities, you have to usually register it with the SEC or find an exemption, right? Those are the two, or it's illegal, as I like to joke. So if you, from the beginning, answer that question no because you think it doesn't apply to you, then you go raise a bunch of money, or maybe it's just from one person, but you are now selling securities and you've not registered or found an exemption. I'll tell you a quick story. My buddy Zach, who I known from like 25 years ago, when I was working at the firm, he was in the hospitality business. He was a bartender and a server. And he just recently started a new company where he literally creates champagne and puts them in a can. It's like a canned champagne thing, which is weird because I'm a wine guy, but apparently it's a very popular thing. And he just went out to his friends and family and started raising. I think he raised like $1 million for this venture. And one of those people he raised money from was my good buddy Kevin, who I just saw not too long ago. And I said, "Oh, Kevin, I wonder, what exemptions did he use? What let me see the docs or whatever." And it turns out they didn't do any of that stuff. They didn't register.
What
they
was
didn't
it,
do
just like a Google form or something?
It was nothing. It was, and they hired a startup lawyer, by the way. So, "Oh no, we talked to a startup." So I reached out to them and said, "Hey, Zach, I know it's been a while, but just wanted to connect with you." And he's like, "Did you talk to a securities lawyer?" That's really what I say. I want to make sure you talk to a securities lawyer. And he's like, "Oh no, this was just friends, and this just went out to friends and family. We didn't advertise it to anyone. Just friends and family, people who really supported us and wanted to see us grow." I'm like, "Well, that's interesting, but that is you are selling a security. Like, just because they're friends and family, just because you didn't advertise, just because they all want to help you, those are not exemptions, right? You are selling them a security because they're giving you money and you're promising them a return. That's the definition of a security. Take money from past investors where the returns are generated by your efforts. Like, you're doing all the work, they're giving you money. That's your textbook definition of a security." And so I said, "Look, you're selling these people securities. You either need to register or find the exemption." And in their case, it probably would have been a simple 506B exemption. I don't know if they had any non-accredits, but you would have expected a private placement member and all the legal compliance docs, and they would have been fine. They didn't have to register it, but they didn't do any of that stuff. So basically what they have now is a non-registered offering, which is a non-compliant offering. So in the event that they lose money, which it's a startup, odds of that are pretty high, and somebody doesn't like that, then they're going to have a really strong case against them. And the penalty for them is going to be, unfortunately, that they're going to have to return all of the money to the investors, plus interest, plus penalties. Now, if your venture just blew up in your face, you probably don't have the money to return, and so you're filing for bankruptcy and all this stuff, and it's just a nightmare. And all of that because you didn't know the answer to the question, is this a security? Because if you did, you would have been like, "Oh crap, I should probably talk to a securities attorney," and then they would have helped you, raise the money compliantly.
And just to clarify to our listener, this is stuff that they need to be researching, learning about before they even ask for the first dollar.
100%. Yeah, that's a great point. Like, when you hire the securities attorney, they do 99% of the work before you raise the first dime. because they have to. They have to they have to understand your deal. They have to prepare all the documents. They have to make sure that the way you're asking for money is not crossing the line and doing something else. Making sure you don't need any other licenses, like just making sure it's all kosher. Draft all the documents, get them in the final, and then you can send those to your investors and start collecting monies. Before then, you can't take a dime. And so literally 99% of the work that the attorney does happens before you even receive your first dollars.
And for those that are wondering, honestly, if you have questions, reach out to Mauricio. You're going to spend thousands of dollars hiring a securities attorney to educate and do this stuff with you. Mauricio's program, it doesn't cost thousands of dollars, and the amount of value that he brings to it is insane. So if you're even considering to raise your very first dollar, reach out to Mauricio. Check out his program.
It's literally it's the same as like 20 minutes of my time. Literally the cost of it on a monthly basis. It's like usually I don't even you're not supposed to talk about the cost of the program, but I think everybody just assumes, oh, this is going to be a $5, $10, $20,000 program, and it's literally less than 20 minutes of time with an attorney
for the month. And that's why I wanted to emphasize it. It's just so people really understood the value. All right, so that was landmine number one. Let's talk about landmine number two.
The second landmine, it's got to be the social media postings, right? Social media, websites, emails, any of that kind of communication, right? Because I always, the same principles apply, whether it's social media, whether it's websites, whether it's, you're always communicating. But for some reason, I don't know, people just don't think that posting on social media is a form of advertising or potentially a form of advertising. So the general rule is, once you understand the security stuff, is that, you may or may not be able to advertise your specific offering, but it'll depend on what exemption you pick. Again, another reason you want to be talking to somebody ahead of time, because what exemption you decide to pick will dictate the path that you can go on. So if you pick a path that allows you to advertise, then cool, then maybe social media is fine. But if you choose a path where you're not allowed to advertise, like where the vast majority of our deals are, there are exemptions called the 506B exemption that prohibits you to advertise your deal, then you can't go on social media and talk about your deal and raise funds on social media. But where people really mess this up is that, unfortunately, the definition of an offer, what the SEC really governs, they govern offers and sales. So the definition of an offer is really broad. So it includes things like pitching your deal. Like, clearly, if you're not allowed to advertise, you cannot go on social media or have on your website, hey, I'm looking for $1 million to buy this 100 unit apartment building. That's clearly not allowed. And I think most people get that, although I do see people posting that on social. But even things that the SEC calls conditioning the market, when you post things on social or put things on your website that get people excited and drummed up about a potential deal, whether that's, talking about prior returns, for example, is a big one, or you may not reference the specific offering, but making posts that really get people excited about it, that is also an offer and considered advertising. So when people start posting things like that, where they'll post things like, my favorite one is probably the one where they're like, hey, we just closed on this deal. Actually, it's a post, I call it the post-close. Just, hey, super pumped, we just closed on this deal, we're celebrating, thanks to all of our investors, blah, 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 blah. And if you want to get on the list for the next one, go here, or email me here, or DM me here. That is a direct call to action from a post that is conditioning the market for the next deal.
So if the call to action wasn't there,
a lot of times getting rid of the call of action would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
But even if so that's one way. So getting rid of those call to action would help. If your post is purely value add, or really that's the way to really use social media, is really value add and thought leadership. So nothing wrong with posting on social media, why multifamily is the greatest asset class of all times, or why, Gilbert, Arizona is a really great marketplace, or here are the 3 reasons tax benefits from real estate, like all those types of value add content, no problem. I'm not talking about a deal, and I'm certainly not talking about a future deal or my past performance. So those are fine. But, hey, we're standing in front of, this is my favorite one. Here, let me give you a good example. The due diligence trip. Right? There's 2 ways to play that. One is to stand, this is the due where when people go, they're in contract, they're in their due diligence, and they go visit, they do an on-site visit of the property. I've seen videos where they say, hey, we're here today in Arkansas in front of our building, we're under contract for this one. Man, this is a great deal. Our investors are really going to crush it. This is going to be an amazing deal, and even if they don't have a call to action, it's clear that they are in the middle of a raise, and they're looking at investors. They're talking about how the deal is going to be amazing. And even if they don't have a call to action, it's clear that they are in the middle of a raise, and they're looking at investors. It's clear that they are in the middle of a raise, and they're looking at investors. They're talking about how the returns of this deal is going to be amazing, right? That would be an example, even if you don't specifically pitch the deal, of conditioning the market. On the flip side, if you did that exact same video, but instead of talking about that, you said, hey, we're here doing our due diligence. Let me talk to you about the 5 things that we look at every time we go to a due diligence. And I've got a little checklist. If you're interested in the checklist, maybe DM me and I'll give you a list of checklists. Number 1, we look at the parking lot. Number 2, we go inside and look at the kitchen for upgrades. Number 3, we do washer and dryer hookups. And you go through a value add educational, here's what we do when we're at it. That's totally cool. Right. And your call to action is not DM me to get on the list to investors. It's, hey, if you want the checklist, let me know, or here's another 10 things that we do.
And that's regardless of the exemption.
That's regardless of the exemption. That is a pure value add. Now, even better would be to not release that video until after you've closed and after the offering's done. That would be even better. Bonus points for that. But I've seen a lot of great videos of sponsors, showing the parking lots, because that's, whatever the value add. Maybe the parking lot is just you're going to draw some lines and create parking spaces and charge for those parking spaces. And so, I've seen people showing videos of but it's more educational. When you start talking or insinuating about the fact that you have a raise, or that this is a great deal and the returns are off the charts and we're going to double our money here, and that is where you cross the line. But social media has got to be one of the biggest landmines that I see all the time. I mean, I do a lot of social media reviews just because it's just easier to show people exactly, this is okay, this is not okay, this is crossing the line.
And for those that think that process is a hindrance, it's not. Like, speaking from experience, the way you raise capital is by doing that. You provide value.
Right.
You provide value, you establish yourself as a thought leader in the space, and you get credibility. If you go straight for the ask, most people aren't going to wire you $100,000 anyways until they know what you've got going on. So it's not a hindrance. And I just want to emphasize that this is not only does it keep you compliant, but in our experience and opinion, it is the appropriate way to do sales when it comes to capital raising.
100%. I mean, you if nobody knows who you are, putting a few posts on there or getting some ads in there, I mean, is it possible? Yes. Have I seen it done? Yes. But people like to invest with people they know, like, and trust. And this is a great mechanism for people to, get people to think they know you because you're constantly in front of them. You're providing value, so they sort of they trust you and they like you. They've got to like you. And so that's really what it is, so that when you really want to get them off of social media. It's really, you want to be able to provide this stuff. The other thing that people forget too is that people know how to find you. Like, you don't need to, people find me all the time. They just DM me. Like, it's not that hard. You just go and then you DM somebody and say, hey, I'd love to connect with you, or hey, do you have some questions, or hey, I'd like to learn about, I'd love to get on your list, or like all of that stuff. They will find you. So you don't need to do that on the social media. Do the social media to establish your credibility, establish your authority, get them off the platform. Go through the proper steps, which is another landmine, which we can talk about another time, which is just establishing these substantive relationships with them so that you can offer them a deal. There's a process behind that. And social media is sort of the pre-process where get them off, get them to know, like, and trust you, get them to give you your contact information via some lead magnet, via a webinar, via whatever, and then go through these steps, get to know them, and then fast forward a couple months, 6 months or whatever, now they're going to be eligible for a future deal.
I think it was Alex Hermosi that suggested doing just 6, 7, 8, just value add. And you're not even asking anything, just value add post, 6, 7, 8 value add post. And then on that next one, then you have a call to action. And what people don't realize, and this is same for raising capital, and this is what we share with our users on our tool, every time you ask, you're withdrawing. You're withdrawing. Anytime you provide value, you're depositing goodwill. And you've got to have those 5, 6, 7 deposits before that one withdrawal, because that withdrawal carries more weight with it. And I think that's on the capital raising side, on more the strategic and the marketing side of things. I think that's where people drop the ball a lot, is that they're asking on every single post. They're asking on every single email. And do you know what we call those people? Assholes.
We talked about books earlier. I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk wrote a great book called Jab, Jab, Right Hook, or Left Hook, or Right Hook, or one of those two. But that's his philosophy too. You just want to give value, and then every so often you ask for something, but you provided them so much value. It's almost like they feel guilty not giving you whatever you want to do.
You're triggering the rule of reciprocity.
The law of reciprocity. I mean, I bought a bunch. I mean, I bought books from Gary where it's like, I'll buy 1,000 books or 5,000 books because he's providing me so much value. I mean, I've gotten whole college educations from his free stuff. So when somebody asks me to do something because he's got a new book out and he wants to get it to #1, I'm happy to help there because he's provided so much value. And I think Hermosi even lately has been talking about even going a step further where in his organic posts, he does no call to action, and the call to actions only happen on the sponsored and the paid part, which I thought was another interesting approach. But yeah, value add is the way to go. And that's how I built my business too. As you know, I was like, my business is all about value, 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 value. And then I actually don't even write. That's one of my downfalls. I don't usually ask. I don't make the ask. I just give. And so, and I think that's maybe one of the reasons this coaching program thing launched really well, because I've never really asked for anything. And now it's finally, hey, now I've got this, now I'm going to charge for this. And so people just kind of flock to it.
Yes. But look at who you've been able to connect with because of your desire to give and to provide value. I mean, you've connected with some of the most well-known names of people in the industry. Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize for those listening too, there's value in providing value. It may not come to you in the way of a monetary means, but providing value, it can connect you with the right person, the right network. And so I think playing the long game has a big part to do with it.
That's a great point in terms of the relationship part. Like, we talked about it early in my story, like the value that I got, from Robert, has become a really good friends, but it was more of the introduction. Like Tom introduced me to these guys who then connected me with my wife. Like that's a great thing. And honestly, for me, even on the client side, I mean, I've gotten now to work with a lot of the top influencers, but it all really started, I think the influencer thing for me started with Brandon Turner. Because once Brandon Turner was on board, now he's talked his influence of people, his people. Now they're asking him, "Hey, who do you use?" And so now I'm getting calls from those people who, "Oh, you work with Brandon. Can you work with me?" Or maybe they don't know I work with Brandon, and I say, "Hey, I work with." "Oh, wait, you work with Brandon? Let me give him a call," and they'll call him and say, "Okay, cool, you're legit." So it's just been a cascade. That's how I get a lot of these new clients, is just a referral system. So if you're depositing for a particular client or a particular person, the referral relationship is a huge one.
And I just want to point out those referrals wouldn't be happening if you weren't providing the amount of value that you do. Yeah, so just knowing the right people on the street, yes, that can help, but being able to truly provide that value and execute and solve their needs, that's why the referrals keep coming. So I just wanted to emphasize that, because you do provide a phenomenal amount of value, and I don't want anybody thinking they can just get into this game, connect with the Brandon Turners of their industry and just expect the referrals to come. You still got to work your ass off and make sure you're providing that value. So, all right, as we wrap this up, let's share one more landmine. And then if you want to find out more of the other landmines, connect with Mauricio. He puts out so much content on YouTube.
Let's go with the landmine that's happening a lot today. One of the biggest landmines is people not understanding that you cannot get paid for referrals. You cannot get paid to assist in the capital raising process. That's a landmine that people are stepping in every single day. I think people know about it, and they're still stepping on the landmines because I think they feel like everybody else stepping on the landmine and it's not exploding. So let me continue to step on the landmines. But one of these days it's going to explode. But because it's gotten harder and harder to raise capital, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, 4 or 5 years ago, money was plentiful. You would just say something and people would give you a check. Now it's much harder. And so it's been very, very enticing for capital raisers who are having a hard time raising for their deal. They're maybe a little short on the raise. Somebody else comes along and says, "Hey, I can bring in $1 million and finish up your raise, but in exchange for that, I want this. And it's usually something in the form, I want a cut of the deal. I want a co-GP interest, or I want some form of compensation for bringing these people in." And I hammer it all the time. I assume everybody sees everything, but obviously that's not the case. So I feel like a broken record. But you cannot pay people to raise capital for you without a broker-dealer license, a broker's license. And there's an exemption to that, which is where syndicators fit into, is something called the issuer exemption. But most of these referrals or capital raisers don't fall into this issue exemption. You obviously you're a capital raiser. The rule for you is the same. That's something, again, most people don't understand. The rule for you is the same. Dallon, you either need a broker-dealer license or you need to find an exemption, because you are raising money for your fund. You are raising money for others. You're raising money for an LLC. It's not you. You're not raising money from Dallon. You're raising money for this LLC. So the rule is you need a broker-dealer license or you need to find an exemption. You fit into the issuer exemption, which is where most 90% of the real syndicators fall into, meaning you don't get paid transaction-based compensation. You do substantial duties, real work, and your primary role is doing the work, right? Your primary role is not going out and raising money. Your primary role is doing the syndication, putting the fund together, vetting the operators, doing all that stuff. So you're doing real work. That's your primary role, and you don't get paid based on how much money you raise. So that's where most syndicators, that's why all syndicators really don't need a license, because they have the issue exemption. But that doesn't apply when you bring in a third party to come raise money for you, and then you give them a cut of the GP in exchange for that. Well, now they violated a lot of time, they violated all of them. They're getting paid transaction based, meaning if I bring in $1 million, you get 10%. If I bring in 500 grand, you get 2% or whatever. They have no substantial duties other than raising the money. They're just there to raise the money, and so their primary role is raising the money. So they fail in all three of those categories, and so they don't fit into the issue exemption. Therefore, they really need a license, and they're just conducting unlicensed activities. So that's another big landmine that's happening right now.
Incredible information. There might be someone listening to this that wants to raise private money and they're overwhelmed.
Yes.
They're scared.
Yes.
They're terrified.
Yes.
Because of all these landmines we're discussing. Speak some hope to that person.
Well, I just crossed on my YouTube channel 500 videos. I think I've covered pretty much every single topic on my YouTube channel. So if you're in the form where you're looking for information and sort of just knowledge, the YouTube channel is a great thing to look at. It's just Mauricio Rauld. Go check out there. Like I said, if there's a topic I haven't covered, DM me. I'll cover it. If you're then looking for more the implementation and making sure, hey, if what I'm doing is fitting within those things, then just reach out to me on Coaching with Mauricio, and you can become part of our weekly meetings that we have every Wednesday, and they're about an hour to 90 minutes. And I'll do a little bit more of a deep dive on that, but we'll also answer your specific questions. Because ultimately, people don't know what they don't know. And so I love it when people ask me like, hey, I'm going to this, I know you got back from the Best Ever Con. Hey, I'm going to this conference. Can I talk to people about my deal? Can I show them this? Can I do this? What can I tell them? What can I not tell them? Having that sounding board of an attorney, I think, gives people peace of mind.
And to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know of any other program out there that's operated this way. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling overwhelmed, first, it's okay. It's normal. We've all been there. But two, you have an opportunity right here in front of you to work with Mauricio that most of us never had before. We had to figure it out from books, conferences. Like, I would argue that what took us about 2 years to understand and come to grips with from these books and conferences, I would say you could probably get that down to 6 months or less. Would you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the idea here is to get it really down in less than 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're brand new, no experience, connect with Mauricio. 3 months from now, you could be raising capital compliantly and getting into these real estate deals to change your life, so you're not in a similar situation that Mauricio and I were in a few years ago when we got started.
And so that also, by the way, when they're using Capitalist Pro, for example, they're not sending out emails that are non-compliant too, because that's another thing we didn't really get to the email thing, but email compliance is a big thing. So when they're using your amazing platform, that they can make sure that they're comfortably sending out proper ones, that they got the disclaimers, and if there's any questions about those, they can ask me on the calls as well.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Mauricio, thank you so much for your time.
No, thanks for having me, man. Great to be here.
And to our listeners, again, if you're looking to raise $100,000 or more from a single investor, this is the show for you. We'll catch you on the next Capital Flow podcast.